And salutations, summoners. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Casual Try Hard Legends of Runeterra podcast. I'm at the helm, your boy who loves Overwhelm, Anthony Rico plays 1723. Today's going to be a unique type of episode. Unfortunately, our regular scheduled programming couldn't happen because Christos is feeling a little bit under the weather. But just like a good old trusty top deck, my special guest on today was able to come out of nowhere and help us produce an episode for y'all. This person is a founding father of the Casual Try Hard Network. He is kind of the king of anything combo. He also happens to be one of my best friends. Say hello to Brian El Profe Wakefield. How's it going, Profe?
I am brought to you by COVID, apparently. People getting sick, I'm stepping in.
Yeah.
How it goes. I don't know if he has COVID, but can you get sick in 2020, 2021 and it not be COVID? So I'm brought to you by COVID. There you go.
Fair point. He did. He had a little bit of a cough, so that's why he felt like
There you go. Been a good run, Christos.
So he felt like he couldn't go on with the show. So today's episode is gonna be a little bit different. It's kind of like a emergency type of. We're gonna kind of go with the flow type of episode. The way I described it to Profe before is this episode is gonna be how I like to play Magic the Gathering and Runeterra, fast and loose. So we're just going to go ahead and kind of go with the vibes and see where it brings us. But for the bigger points, I did want to talk a little bit of the Runeterra meta, where it's at, and how people are not so happy with it right now. And we're basically in a moment where we're just waiting on for the next patch. And then Profe and I are going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do some type of thought experiments where I'm going to tell him about my favorite Runeterra cards, and he's going to let me know if it would be playable in the MTG world, and then some MTG cards that we think would be awesome in Runeterra. To start us off, and I know this kind of happens a lot in any type of card game, because I know this happens a lot in Magic the Gathering, Profe. But basically, after 2 or 3 weeks after the expansion, it seems like the meta has kind of settled. And it's settled in a place where a lot of people aren't too happy.
All right, so you're dancing around it. So I got to ask, why are they not happy? Like, what is broken about the gameplay that they're just like, I don't want to do this anymore?
So there's three big things. It looks like the deck that has been the best deck for the past, I want to say 2 expansions, Twisted Fate and Fizz, is still a ridiculous deck that is basically murdering the competition. It's like, in Magic, when there is that one deck that's just the best deck and that's the end of it. This is kind of the situation we're finding ourselves over in Runeterra. Just looking at some of the numbers, these numbers were brought to you by Cosmic Plays. If you don't follow him, go and follow him on Twitter. He basically likes to compile all of the data that he finds on Mobalytics, and he puts it in a nice little presentation for us. According to the stats, around 13% of all decks are Twisted Fate Fizz, and their win record is about 56%. Which is rather high in a sample size of 27,721 matches. In Magic's history, Prof, or at least as long as you've been playing, has there kind of been a situation like this?
Recently, like every set. So, right, we've had if you go back to like Kaladesh, we had a situation with like a parasitic mechanic, like energy, where there's like cards from like 1 or 2 sets that work really well together, and they're very powerful, and then no new cards can kind of force their way in, or no new strategies can develop because the package that this mechanic builds is way too good. Yes. And then before the world ended, when my co-host and I, James, went to GP Richmond, which was also a Pro Tour, the best deck at the Pro Tour was an Oko deck and Oko was in like 75% of the decks that were being played.
Wow.
And like over half the decks were just blue green Oko. And then some decks were like, I'll be blue, green, and black, but play Oko. So it was just a completely and totally broken format.
Wow.
Now you guys have the advantage of when stuff breaks, they just like go in and like turn some knobs on some cards and you get like a different game on some level.
Yes, that patch is basically what everyone is crying for right now. So
I mean, has it only been like a couple weeks since the last set came out?
Yes, it's been about, I want to say about 3 weeks now. And
we're already to the wailing and gnashing of teeth point of things.
Yes, that's awesome. Kind of like a point that I wanted to make on the show. That no matter what card game, I kind of feel like this kind of happens. And I know this is a point that you brought. You and James definitely talked about on the show. But it's basically because since we are one global community, anytime we get new cards and new things to play with, we just solve everything so quickly nowadays that it kind of takes away from the fun of discovering new strategies and new ways to play the game.
Sorry,
no,
card games really aren't made for the internet, which is kind of a weird thing to say, right? When Magic first started, like Magic and even like Pokemon back in the day, there was no internet. Or very limited internet. When Magic started, there was no internet, right? You didn't even know what all the cards were in Magic, right? You could play against someone and they could play a card that you had never seen before, right? And that was actually how the game was designed.
Right.
Was like, oh, hey, I've never seen that card before. That's so cool. And now, like, you get your spoilers, or like as soon as a set releases, you know all the cards. There are more games played like in the first 20 minutes of the cards being out than were played in all of development, right? Like stuff gets missed, right? There's like the card files aren't big enough to leave you enough time to make it so it takes 3 months to figure out what the best deck is. And so it just makes it so the game gets solved way faster. And then if it ends up in a place that's not fun or not like novel, people just get mad.
Yes, and that's 100% what's happening right now. So not only is TF Fizz still the best deck to bring, and it's so OP. It allows you to draw so many cards, and basically the way that it wins is the game is that you draw all these cards and all your threats are basically elusive, which is kind of like flying for you, Profe. So all they do is draw all these different cards and all their threats are elusive, and there isn't enough interaction or good enough interaction now where you can't compete with it. You can't really win because they're drawing all these cards. And then the second issue that a lot of people seem to be having is with actually one of the regions, which is Targon. So I guess in Magic the Gathering terms, it's kind of like people having an issue with how powerful, I guess, blue is in certain metas. Oh, so a perfect example for that actually in Magic recently is how Simic has been so busted, I feel like, for the past couple expansions. Would you agree?
Yeah, so we just started getting spoilers for the new set, and they spoiled a 1 blue-green mythic, and James said, I'm not even going to read it because it's going to be banned in a month. And it's not that good, thankfully, but they've had to ban 2 blue-green mythics in the last year and a half.
Wow.
From Standard, Historic, Pioneer, Modern, and one of them from Legacy. So they just had to ban them off of the face of Magic.
Just for the Runeterra folks, Magic has been out for a really long time, so they have different types of formats. So when he mentions things like Legacy and Modern, it's just a different format of cards you can use.
So when we talk about Standard, that's cards from the last 2 years. Then you have Pioneer, which is cards from the last 8 or 10 years. And then Modern is the last 15 years. And Legacy is every card ever printed since 1993. 94 when the game started.
It's a fun
with
time.
like a ban list.
Yes.
With some cards that were just like, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. That's too good. So for a card that was printed in 2020 to be so good that it outclasses every card ever printed in the history of Magic minus like 7, it's like, perhaps we're not very good at making those. And they just keep making cards in that vein, in that color combination.
Yeah,
and so it used to be Simic isn't very good, and now it's, oh my god, everything blue and green is busted, what are you doing?
Yes. So people are starting to have kind of the similar feelings towards Targon. And the things that make Targon so powerful is one of its mechanics is called Invoke. And basically play the card and then it invokes. And what it does is you get to choose out of 3 cards that pop up, and you get to choose one of those 3 cards from that pool of, it's usually like around 6. So there's a pool of 6 cards you can get when you invoke. You invoke, 3 show up, and then you pick the one that you want. And the scenario that it creates is that when you have cards with an invoke, you basically are a jack of all trades type of thing. You have a toolbox that you basically have an answer to kind of whatever you're playing against, and other regions don't have that. Don't have the capability to have all of the tools in the toolbox, So, for example, it would be, against aggro, Targon can pick up Soul Sisters, and Soul Sisters is a 5-mana 4/3 with lifesteal, and just like in Magic, anything that gains life and you're running aggro, you're going to have a problem. And then in the same vein, Soul Sisters has another card that's elusive. So you can be playing big guys like me, and then they play a Soul Sister that has elusive. What am I going to do? I can't block against it. And then Targon also has Hush, which I've mentioned on the show before. They nerfed it. But Hush's ability for 3 mana to completely negate your card's effect and just make it a basic dumb thing is very devastating. And then now in Targon is Aphelios. And once again, they did nerf Aphelios to a 3/2. But Aphelios is another thing that has all the tools it needs. Like, it just has so much ability to kind of adapt to whatever they're playing against that it just has too much power. Because Aphelios has the ability to grant using its moon weapons, it has the ability to grant your unit lifesteal. It has the ability to deal 3 to a unit. It has the ability to stun a unit, all in its toolbox. And then you pair it up with other invoke cards as an aggro player / overwhelm player. What am I supposed to do? Like, unless I get under them real quickly, or they just don't have the Hush, I'm in trouble. In Magic's history, Profe, has there kind of been a situation like that where like a region or a deck just simply has too many tools and everyone just wants to play it because it's the best one?
Well, what you're describing is, so we just had spoilers today and they spoiled a new mechanic, and the mechanic is called Learn. And you cast the spell, and you can search from your sideboard, which is 15 cards you have that are outside the game that like can come in between games, because our matches are best of 3. And you can go search your sideboard for a card, and it has to be a certain kind of card. It's called a lesson. These are all new mechanics. So you cast your card that has an effect. It might be a creature, it might be a draw spell, and if it has the ability to learn, you get to go search your sideboard for a card that can be whatever answer you need it to be, as long as it's one of these lesson cards. So this sounds very similar.
Yes, it sounds very similar.
Which I was like, oh, this is bad. But, so, like, this is not a good thing. So the most recent example of this is from Throne of Eldraine. We had this mechanic called Adventures, which was you had a creature that also could be a spell. So you could cast the spell side of the card and then later cast the creature. So you had all these decks that basically, they might not have all the answers, but they were always, all their cards were actually 2 cards. It was a bounce spell and then a 3/1, I guess it would be elusive creature.
Right.
Or it was a kill spell and then a cheap 4/3 attacker. And so those decks that had the adventures have been really some of the best decks. They've even had cards banned out of them, and they're still the best decks because you have, instead of being like everyone else where you're playing 60 cards and you have 60 cards, all of your adventure cards are 2 cards.
That's a great way of also kind of explaining what's happening in Targon. That's a great way.
So here, like, it sounds like you cast a thing and you go get another card.
Right.
So you're always up cards. You always have something to do because all of your cards are getting you another card. And the fact that you get to pick what cards you want means that you, like you were saying, you never have a matchup where you don't have what you need.
Right.
So, like, there was a time, like, about a year and a half, about 2 years ago now, where the best deck in Magic was a control deck, and it played literal 0 ways to win the game. But it played 4 cards that let you search your sideboard for a card. So it would play and it would draw the first one of those and be like, okay, I need a way to deal with the creatures. So it would go get a way to deal with the creatures. Then a long time later, they would draw another one and go like, oh, there's something else I need. I'm going to get that. And then eventually they would get their win condition out of their sideboard and to get around to winning the game. So they always had whatever answer they needed was already in their deck at the start of the game.
Right. And, you know, I'm not saying that decks shouldn't have the answer to counter the deck that they're playing against, but to have the ability to just, you know, instead of drawing, you know, in most situations you have to draw the answer, right? Like you have to draw the burn spell to kill the thing. Or for me, in my example, I have to draw Battle Fury to let my overwhelm a creature smack. And that's fine, like I have to draw it. But in Targon, you just kind of get those answers for free. You know? Like you're playing a creature and then you're getting the thing that you need on top of it too. So it's like, it's too powerful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the way that you balance these cards is you make the creature or the front side of the spell has to be overcosted, right? You have to be paying a tax for getting that extra card, getting that, like, answer, right? Having 8 copies of the card that you need in your deck because you have 8 cards that have this ability.
Right.
Instead of being limited to your normal amount. Right. And if they do a bad job of costing the creature or costing the spell on the front side and the penalty is not big enough, then the card ends up being too good.
I would argue that the penalty is not big enough for most of these Targon cards. And it seems like a lot of the Runeterra community agrees with it.
It's one of those things that when they do a new mechanic, they don't exactly know how to cost it, right? So if they miss a little low, it becomes too good and takes over. And like we said before, you guys do have the advantage of, like, they can just come in with a patch and, like, add 1 or 2 to all of these
Please, Riot,
cards.
please, the community's begging for it. Please, put up this patch.
Yeah, but, like, you have the ability to, like, move it some.
Correct.
So it does, like, anything that gives you, like, extra cards, extra resources, and then selection is just going to be too good.
I'm with you 100%.
Right? Like, if it was just, I'm sure it was just, like, creature, draw a random card. Right? That still gives you a card, but it's not always the card that you need. Right? Like, if you have a card that's just, like, play a creature, always draw a spell, that's too strong. Sorry. I guess in Runeterra, you always draw a spell. I guess I should say always draw the exact cards you need. Like, always top deck the cards you need.
I was gonna say, in Runeterra we got a couple of cards like that, but you know, I think the community is making it loud and clear that they want Ryan to fix these type of things. We'll see what Ryan does. I really hope that they listen to what we're trying to say. They start changing things. Luckily for me, I'm over with the plebeians in Platinum right now. So I'm just having fun playing the decks that I like to play. So I've been having a lot of fun with Teemo Sejuani. I've also been having a lot of fun with Draven Renekton. And then I kind of compiled a little Renekton Sejuani list in which Profe actually helped me make 2 or 3 really important card choices that actually has been amazing in this meta in that I find myself in Platinum. Because I guess the hotness right now is to do kind of a Trundle Lysandra with Iona matchup instead of the Trundle Lysandra Freljord and Shadow Isles. They're doing Trundle Lysandra Freljord and Iona. The big difference in that is that they, instead of running Ruination, they've been running, I forget the name of the card, but it's worth 10 mana, and it basically recalls all the cards except the one that you choose. So, Profe, it's like playing, it's basically 10 mana, bounce everything else on the field except what you choose kind of thing.
Like, is it just you choose one thing?
Yes.
Or is it just one thing for each player?
One thing. So basically, my opponent, what they usually do is they'll go ahead and choose their Trundle and then bounce everything else. But the way that I built the deck, I have a lot of Predict in my beginning creatures, and I have Ancient Preparations. So whereas if I'm playing another aggro deck, you bounce all my things, and then now I have to play everything back. There's really no benefit there. But because I play things with Predict and Ancient Preparations, when I play my things back, I get to basically scry for 3. So basically, you bounce my things, I put them back, I look at the top 3 of my cards, choose the next one that I'm about to draw, and then eventually I get to my answer. So it's been pretty awesome. I've been killing it. I went on I believe it was like a 12-game win streak this morning. It's been a lot of fun, and I've been killing it. So I'm not as upset with the meta, because down here in Platinum, everyone plays whatever they want to play, and it's a lot of fun.
Gotcha.
But now to turn things kind of away from the Runeterra meta, I wanted to kind of play a thought experiment with Profe. Profe's been playing Magic for 11,000 years, it seems like. So I thought it would be a really fun game to kind of tell him 5 of my favorite Runeterra cards and see if he thinks that they would do a good job in Magic the Gathering. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So if I were to say I love to play with a... Now, granted, I think we're going to have to kind of change the mana cost a little bit because in Runeterra, playing a 7 or 8 mana card isn't as difficult as it is in Magic. But one of my favorite cards in Runeterra, and is usually my finisher in my Noxus decks, is Captain Farron. Captain Farron is a 8/8 Overwhelm, which is trample, unit that when I get to put into play, I create 2 Decimates. And Decimates are basically lava axes. So in Magic turns,
they deal 5?
They deal 4.
4, so somewhere, but okay.
So I guess in Magic turns, it would be an 8 mana, 8/8 trample that when I enter the battlefield, you put 2 4 damage, burn spells in my hand.
And how much do those burn spells cost to cast?
5.
Okay. I think even at 8, that would be probably, I don't know, it's probably fairly costed in Magic, and the fact that you just draw 2 spells that like you can definitely cast one the next turn.
Yes.
Probably makes it playable even at 8. It's hard because like recent Magic designs have like totally skewed what we think is like reasonable at a different mana cost. But no, that would be good, I think. Like as like a finisher and like a deck that's like trying to get ahead on mana. Yeah, I think that would be good.
Boom. Captain Farron passes the test, y'all. So in all your Noxus decks, run Captain Farron because it's a phenomenal card. My second favorite card that I've loved to play so far is Ancient Yeti. Now, Ancient Yeti is going to be different, Profe, because you can't do this effect. Well, you couldn't do Captain Farron's deck really in paper anyway, but I don't know if you can't really do the effect in Magic paper, but possibly in Arena. But basically, it starts out as a 7 mana 5/5 Overwhelm.
Okay.
But for every round that it is in your hand, subtract 1 mana cost. So basically, if I draw Ancient Yeti in my opening hand, by turn 4, I get to play a 4 mana 5/5 Overwhelm. Then, turn 5, it becomes 3 costed, turn 6, 2, turn 7, 1. Is that a card that would be viable in Magic? Now, in Runeterra, right now in this meta, I think that card is absolutely exceptional. It absolutely sucks, right, if you draw it later in the game. But if you have it in your opening hand, it gives basically it gives you a big beefy unit when you're playing against aggro. At 4 mana, it's pretty undercosted. And then against control, usually on that 4 or 5 slot, they really don't have a lot of good answers to deal with a 5/5 Overwhelm creature. So I really like it in Runeterra, and I like where it's placed in this meta. But in Magic, do you think that card would have a spot?
So, as weird as it sounds, I don't know. So, to give you a sense of like the green creatures we're getting now.
Okay.
There's a 5 mana 6/6, I guess it would be Overwhelm, that has, I don't know what the equivalent of Vigilance is. It can attack and block. It doesn't, so you can attack and then still block with it?
Yeah, in Runeterra, everything has...
everything has Vigilance?
Yeah.
Okay. And then it also has Reach, which I guess means it can block creatures with evasion. And when it attacks or blocks, you either get to draw a card, gain 3 life, or make a 3/3.
What card is that?
Elder Gargaroth. The last 2 years of Magic design has just been crazy since you left.
Wow.
But a cheap vanilla trampler may or may not be good. Like when I can just like on turn 4, turn 5 in Magic play a card that's just a ball of words. And right now we have a 4/4 dragon with evasive, and it can attack the turn you cast it. And when you attack, it makes a token that gives you 2 mana. So it only really casts 3 mana.
Wow.
And if you target it with a spell or ability, you or your opponent, you make another one of those tokens that makes 2 mana. So like you can just pay for it the turn that you play it. So things have gotten wild.
Yeah, that seems broken in any game.
Yes. 4 mana 5/5 trampler is above rate, but it's not so far above rate that I'm like, oh my god, that makes no sense.
Folks, Captain Farron was a yes. Ancient Yeti, not so much. My favorite card number 3 is going to be Sejuani. So Sejuani is my favorite champion of all time. It is a 6 mana 5/6 Overwhelm. When you play it, it frostbites a enemy unit. So the best way to kind of describe that to you, Profe, is that when I play it, I get to frostbite my enemy unit. So it basically makes its attack power 0. And then I grant it vulnerable so that if I go to my attack step, I can actually choose how that card blocks.
Okay.
And then I guess this is another situation where you can't do it in paper really, but you could probably do it in arena. Sejuani's level up is if I've seen you if you've done damage in 5 rounds, I level up to a 6/7 overwhelm, and as soon as I see the first damage go through, I frostbite all of your enemy's units. So basically, because my creatures have overwhelm, the second that one of my creatures' overwhelm damage goes through, it frostbites all of the other enemy units.
So this is close.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
I think.
Okay.
I think it would see play. Like, the second part is like a tracking issue that you couldn't do in paper Magic.
Yes,
You could do some version of that, and I don't think it's too far of a design to, like, you could design it, I think, like, where it'd have to be on the battlefield, but if 5 of your creatures deal damage, it gets a counter.
Right.
Or something. Or each time a creature does damage, put a counter on it. When you get this many counters, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah, like, I think that is workable. I think it would be good. Again, like, for the Legends of Runeterra people, right? You guys get mana every turn.
Yes.
So each half of the turn cycle, right? So, like,
yes.
So this is like a thing that you would play on, like, your 3rd turn. This is something that in Magic, if we're lucky, we get to play on our 6th turn. Maybe closer to our 7th or our 8th turn.
Right.
So, like, it does a lot, so I think it would be playable. And I might be underestimating it, like, in terms of the fact that it basically gets to kill a creature when it comes into play if you have another creature.
Yes. And it gets to, like, stop an opponent's, like, let's say they play a big dumb thing, you just play Sejuani and you frostbite it, so they spend all their mana on doing absolutely nothing. So it's a great tempo play on the defensive too.
Does it stay a 0-power creature for the rest of the game?
No. Just for that turn.
Okay.
Or that token cycle.
So I don't know how PG we are on this podcast, but I would just like to say that you said the phrase "big beefy unit," and that's pretty rough.
Oh my god!
I just wanted to point that out.
That is.
You're talking about big beefy units, and I'm like, all right, cool. That's where this podcast is going. That's fine.
Oh my god! So we got a yes on Farron, maybe on Yeti, and then probably another yes on Sejuani.
Yes.
So this next card I absolutely hate. I think it's terrible, but I am wondering what your opinion on it would be in Magic. So this is going to be another champion, and her name is Fiora. So the next card is Fiora. She is a 3-mana 3/3 with Challenger. So a Challenger basically is I can choose which enemy unit blocks me type of effect. I know you have it in Magic. And its level up is I've killed 2 units. So if it kills 2 units, it then becomes a 3-mana 4/4 Challenger. And then it says, when I've killed 4 enemies and survived, you win the game.
Okay.
So
it has to. So that card has to kill the 4 enemies.
Yes.
Okay.
That specific version has to have killed 4 enemies, and you end up winning the game. The problem with Fiora, and I know it is a deck style that you're not always the biggest fan of, but it's basically Runeterra's version of Boggles, and I hate it.
Like, it sounds like it's a protect the queen kind of strategy.
Yes, it is protect the queen to, like, the ultimate, and they always have the protection spell. And it's basically my biggest gripe to Runeterra right now.
not the funnest kind of card, right? Like it does make the game 100% all about it.
Yes.
Because like what is the starting life title in Runeterra?
20.
20. So like a 4/4 is just like if you just decide I'm not gonna block it, right? It's you just like get annihilated in 5 turns.
But it has Challenger.
So you have to block it.
So the when I have the Fiora, I will basically grab whatever unit I want and make it block.
Okay. It's in a weird spot because on one hand, it could be good enough in Magic. But on the other hand, like I guess I don't know exactly how like Runeterra is like built. But like if that was the best deck in Magic, I feel like there would be more like non-targeted removal. So we call them sweepers, where you just kill every creature.
Right.
Right. And so decks would be leaning on, well, I'm just going to kill everything. Or they're just like, you know, there are decks in Magic that have no creatures or have very few creatures for you to try to kill.
Right.
Where it would just be like a 3 mana 4/4 or 3 mana 3/3. And like a 3 mana 3/3 is not good enough. So like I feel like those kind of alternate win condition cards in Magic often fall short.
Okay.
Because just like of other things in the game could allow that to just not have the same kind of impact.
I just think right now in Runeterra we don't have nowhere near the same amount of like kill spells that Magic has, because most of our interaction is in the combat phase, and this card basically negates all that.
Yeah.
And it always has the protection spell to stop all of it, and it causes issues. Like I almost every time that I see that I queue up against Fiora, I kind of want to just surrender right there because I know I'm not going to have a fun time.
Trust me. I spent last night playing a deck, and like if I was like, I'm playing against Control, scoop them up. Not gonna bother. Like I know how this is gonna go.
Like here we go.
Right now, there's a card that is 2 mana in Magic that has. It's a weird twist on an old mechanic, but you get poison counters, and if you get to 10 poison counters, you lose the game. And every time it attacks, it gives you 2 poison counters.
Oh wow!
So it just has to be unblocked 5 times, and you lose. Now there's not a deck built around it because there's not the rest of the pieces, but it's something similar where you just are like, oh, if I don't deal with this thing in 5 turns, I'm going to lose the game. And this is the same kind of way where it's like, well, if I don't deal with this in a couple turns, I'm going to lose the game, and then they can just sit on a bunch of spells that make it so you can't deal with it.
Yes.
So it's a maybe, but I think that there's enough tools in Magic and there's enough variety in decks where you could like build your deck that there's just never a creature to kill, so that it wouldn't get a buff.
So it's probably not good enough.
Probably not good enough.
All right, that's crazy. I mean, that there just tells you the difference between the games. And then this last card I wanted to kind of put in here as well, because this card is getting a lot of people upset as well. And I don't think it's something you can really do in Magic right now, but I think it'll be interesting for you to kind of think about. So right now there is a card called Concurrent Timelines. It's 1 mana. It's a slow spell, so it's sorcery speed for you all.
Mm-hmm.
For the rest of the game, the first time you play a follower each round, pick one of 3 followers with the same cost to transform it into. So let's say I play 1 mana creature. It will give me 3 choices of 3, and I get to choose which creature it'll transform to. Note that it will do the effect of the first creature and then transform into the second creature.
Okay.
Is
So
this card good enough or healthy? Because I will just give you an example that in Runeterra right now, this is a combo finisher because there's a 9-mana card called Ledros that you basically it's a huge unit, 9/6 fearsome, and it hits your opponent for half its health, and then it turns into a Dreadway, which is a 9-mana 4/8 double all damage dealt by your skills, spells, and allies. So on the first side, it hits the opponent for the first half, and then when it flips, it hits the opponent for the second half, and then the opponent is dead.
Okay.
So right now, it's not a fun time in Runeterra.
So I guess how does it work with the spell? So you like play the spell. So you play the guy that hits them for half their life.
Yes.
And then you turn it into the thing that has the
it becomes the Dreadway, which then becomes a double damage.
Okay.
And then it kills everything. Like it kills your opponent.
But like, so is it? It becomes a copy of a unit with the same cost?
Yes.
Okay.
So it becomes a 9-drop, and then becomes a 9-drop, but the skills that it has are different. So you play it in the beginning, and the problem is like you play against players that, aren't so great, and all they do is like turtle, and then if they just happen to draw the right 9-mana card, the game's all over. Like, they didn't do anything spectacular. All they did was turtle and just drew the card at 9 mana, and a lot of people are upset because there really isn't a way for you to even interact with it. So it's like, if you high roll, you just lose automatically. But in Magic, can you see, I don't, like, you can't really do this type of effect, but in the Magic sphere, do you think this card is good enough?
Probably. Like, let's say it was, instead of it transforms into it, you like search your deck for a card and put it onto the battlefield. Right?
Okay.
So you're like, so I'm thinking of this like an enchantment in Magic. You pay 1 mana for this enchantment, thus you turn all of your creatures into something else of the same cost.
Sure.
And it just sits there, right? And then you play the front half, and then and then it turns into the thing that like wins the game.
Right.
So it probably is good enough. Now, like, we'd have to scale the mana costs back from 9 to like 5 or 6.
Right.
To make it more accurate to like Magic costs. But yeah, I think that it is probably good enough, but I don't know if it's good enough to be like a top tier deck. So right now it actually got banned in a couple formats. We had this card called Tybalt's Trickery.
Okay.
Which was 1 in a red, and you get to counter a spell.
As a red card?
As a red card. Now, what makes it red is you randomly choose a number, 1, 2, or 3, and you put that number of cards from your deck into the graveyard. And then you start revealing cards until you reveal another spell. And then you cast that spell. So, people were like playing 0 mana cards, countering them on turn 2, and then putting in things that were 8 mana or 10 mana into play.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a top tier deck because it's really fragile.
Right.
But it was a deck that people were playing, particularly in best of 1, where like you just high roll, you keep sending back your hand until you get to 0 mana spell, the Tybalt's Trickery, and some number of lands. And you just try to high roll into your spell.
Yeah, I think the issue with both of these cards is just it happens so early on that your opponent just can't interact with it, and because there's no interaction, that's what causes the feels bad moment.
I think it's also just the fact that you don't feel like your opponent did anything, and you just lost the game. You lost the game to a coin flip.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, did they draw the thing? Okay, I guess I lost.
Right.
So, like, it doesn't feel like you were outplayed or there was any kind of big strategic advantage. They got all their advantage from, like, the deck red sheet, right? Whatever deck they registered, and then they drew that card. We call those kind of decks in Magic, like, glass cannons, where they're very powerful, but anything goes wrong and they just fall apart.
Right.
And there's a lot of those decks, and they're usually not very good because a lot of stuff can go wrong. But if there's not good interaction or way to stop them from getting their combo, then yeah, you just lose.
Yeah, it's just horrible.
So like I could see. So there was a card not too long ago. I'll tell you the text. It's like a 7/6, and it costs 2 less to cast for each creature that you sacrifice when you cast it. And it was like 6 black. And when it came into play, you could set someone's life total to 10.
Oh.
Well, you could just try to turbo it out and put someone at 10. So, like, I could see where, like, we have a card that lets you do that, and then, like, okay, you then get rid of it and you put in, like, a 5/5 evasive creature that deals double damage with haste. Lets it attack the turn you play it. I think all Runeterra creatures have that.
Yes.
Right? In Magic, it's a bonus. And then you just kill them on the spot. And, like, I think that would be super unfun.
That's crazy.
So, like, but I think the deck would work, but you would also just have games where, like, you didn't do the thing and you, like just lost.
Right.
But, like, if you do the thing, your opponent just feels like nothing they did mattered.
Exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people right now are feeling against that deck and against the Fiora deck. So in my eyes, those two decks need to be re-looked at. They need some changes. I think also with TF Fizz, you have to negate its ability to draw so much, because no matter what, as Christos and Logan will always say, no matter what card game you play, drawing is always the right answer. And when you have a deck that draws so many cards like that, it just needs to be looked at. So it should be. Go for it.
Is this similar to, like, the old mono blue decks where you, like, play a threat, have it somehow set up that you would, like, draw extra cards each turn and kind of protect that threat and, like, stop your opponent from doing stuff? Or are you just getting your raw card advantage some other way?
You're getting your raw card advantage some other way, and then the champion that is allowing you to do it, their abilities and skills are just amazing. So let me just give you a quick lesson on Twisted Fate, because this card, if you're playing with it, is a real fun time. But if you're playing against it, you want to cry a lot. So it's a champion, so it has a level up ability, but it's a 4 mana 2/2 with quick attack. So it's like a 4 mana 2/2 with first strike. On play, you get to play a Destiny card, and a Destiny card is a skill, and you have 3 choices. So you can either play the blue card, which refills 1 spell mana and you get to draw 1. You get to play the gold card, which deals 2 and stuns an enemy. Stun being tapping it. Or you do the red card, which is deal 1 to all enemies and the enemy nexus. So what you end up doing is, and then the level up is, I've seen you draw 8+ cards. So they basically wait.
Just any point in the game.
Yes. And then this is where it gets broken. Leveled up Twisted Fate is a 3/3 quick attack. But each round, the first 3 times you play a card, you get to play a Destiny card on top of that. So you level them up, you play 1 card, and then when you play that 1 card, you get to choose one of the 3 Destiny cards. You play the second card, you get to play another Destiny card. So you start getting your free card advantage that way. And then it's champion card is Twisted Fate's Pick a Card, which you place a card from your hand in your deck to draw 3 at the next round start. So you put a card from your hand into your deck, and then you draw 3. Now those cards are fleeting, which means you can only play them that turn. But can you already see like how this starts getting out of hand?
Yeah, like that's not okay.
Yeah.
So they actually banned a card similar to that in Magic that was just 5 mana, basically draw 5. You have until the end of the next turn to play those cards.
Essentially, it's similar, yes.
And then they printed another card that was 4 mana, draw 4. You have until the next turn to play those cards. And that card hasn't been banned, but it's part of one of the best decks in the most recent standard.
Which card was that?
So that's Showdown of the Skalds.
Oh man, I didn't even hear about that.
It's an enchantment, 2 red, 2 white, red. It gives you 4 cards, and the next turn it like rewards you by making your creatures larger when you cast spells.
Wow.
So you like play a big battlefield, you play it, you get a bunch of cards, you make your battlefield big, and you like beat down. So no, anytime that you're able to get more resources, I mean, because at their heart, right, like all like card games where you're like drawing cards and stuff is about gaining and managing your resources.
Right.
And when the game stops being about managing your resources and then becomes, how do I figure out how to most effectively deploy all these resources I have because I have everything I could want? Like the game changes, right?
Yes.
If you're getting 3 cards a turn and your opponent's getting 1,
game's over.
You win that game.
Yeah.
You win that game every time.
And then I forgot to add, there's a card called Stress Testing in that deck, and it removes fleeting from all your cards in hand. And it's 1 mana for burst. So then you just get to keep them. And you're just looking at your opponent with a fistful of cards and a bunch of elusive threats. And you're just like, well, I guess this is what this is about. So even as a non-Runeterra player, I'm sure you can see how ridiculous that starts being.
Yeah. Part of things, which is hard, right, is since you get a card every turn, right, they really have to like amp up things that are card advantage because you're already getting a ton of cards anyway.
Right.
So like they can't just give you a card because that's not that good. They got to give you 2 cards or 3 cards to really kind of push it over the top to make people want to play those cards.
So that's a great segue to the next portion, which is going to be Magic cards in Runeterra. Since you're talking about drawing cards, I wanted to... I mean, I think I know the answer, but then Divination wouldn't be broken in Runeterra, I feel like.
No. I don't know if it's even playable. Like 3 mana, draw 2 cards?
Right.
So it would be less good in Runeterra, right? Because Magic, 1 card giving you 3 cards is a big deal. Like, we typically pay 5 mana for that effect. So...
yeah. We were also talking about last episode how me and Christos would love to see a young Pyromancer in Runeterra.
Oh, so then where you cast a spell, you make a little unit and lets you like accrue advantage?
I don't think it will be as good in Runeterra just because in Runeterra there's like Overwhelm where it's just 1-to-1, and then on Runeterra you have a board size of 6. But maybe because of that, the Runeterra version, instead of doing 1/1s, they're 2/2s.
Yeah, they'd have to be bigger.
They'd have to be bigger to make up for it.
Like, Young Pyromancer is, like, good in very specific decks. They're typically decks that are trying to, like, limit your opponent's resources.
Right.
And, like, put a squeeze on them that way. Either by, like, taking cards from their hand or denying them, like, mana. So that, like, oh, this thing that's going to make 2 bodies eventually is going to take 2 cards for them to deal with. And, like, you're just stretching their resources there. I don't know if in Runeterra, like, the incremental advantage is good enough. Without, like, the bodies, being more valuable. Bigger.
Yeah.
Because like 1/1s in Magic aren't really cards, right? They're not worth a full card.
Right.
But like in older formats where there's not a lot of removal and everyone's playing like very specific narrow answers, like sometimes the 1/1 ends up being worth a card because it does like 8 points of damage.
Right.
Because they just don't have an answer for it. So it kind of depends. It depends like on like how much value those tokens have.
Yes.
So I was thinking, okay, we've got the mana system in Runeterra, blah 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 blah. That's like kind of more generous than in Magic.
Yes.
And I was like, we got to come up with something that is big to kind of like scale with like the Runeterra mana system.
Right.
And so I thought that Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger would be a card that would fit in Runeterra.
Go ahead and explain to the folks what that is.
It is 10 mana for a 10/10. When you cast it, I guess, or summon it, in Magic it exiles 2 permanents. So I guess on Runeterra it would destroy
obliterate.
or remove...
Obliterate.
Obliterate 2 permanents or 2 creatures. And then when it attacks, your opponent puts the top 20 cards of their library into exile, which they just like go away.
So I love that. And I think that is the more fair version of what we kind of have going on right now.
That's the fair version. Doing that on turn 5 is fair.
Because...
Okay, I'm letting this wash over me. I wasn't changing its mana cost. I was leaving it at 10. So turn 5, that is like A-okay in Runeterra? Okay.
So what we have going on right now in Runeterra is it's like the Watcher, but it's a little bit different. So in Runeterra, the Watcher is 17 mana. Okay. I cost 0 if you summoned 4+ allies that cost 8+ this game, and on attack, obliterate the enemy deck. So this is probably closer to what's that other huge Eldrazi that when you attacked, it would put stuff into the like 15 cards into your. Is it Ulamog?
So Ulamog puts cards from their deck into obliterates 20 cards of their deck. So like a third to half of their deck in Magic. There's also Emrakul, that when you cast it, you take an extra turn. It costs 15. And when you attack, they have to sacrifice 6 permanents. So it just, like, obliterates their board. And you're attacking for 15 evasive.
So...
Yeah, I pretty much they're dead.
Yeah. So the Watcher is in that, in the sense that, like, once you put it down, it just obliterates the enemy deck. And then when the enemy goes to draw a card, the game's over.
Yeah.
So it's like along those lines. And I think it just matters, I guess, on the setup costs. But I think I would like that. Or like there's a space in the game for that type of effect, I feel like.
Like I said, I was just trying to come up with something that is, like, that would be big and, like, flashy. I also thought, like, Carnage Tyrant might work.
The dinosaur!
So it's 6 mana for a 7/6. It can't be countered, which I don't know if that's the thing you have to worry about in Runeterra.
Not really. Not at all.
Which means, like, you know that if you cast a spell, it's going to resolve. In Magic, there are spells that can stop your spell from actually happening.
Right.
So this, you know it's going to resolve. And then it has hexproof, which means it can't be targeted by spells or abilities your opponent controls.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about it ever dying.
Right.
Unless it dies in combat. And it's a 7/6. Like, that seemed like... it has Overwhelm.
Yes, it does.
So it seemed like right in, like, Anthony's wheelhouse of, like, big, safe creatures that he knows nothing bad can happen to, and smashy.
I would love Carnage Tyrant. But I would love it. But my opponents wouldn't love it because there's no way to interact with it. and
Yeah.
not in Runeterra right now. So I think that's the biggest issue. But I'm down, man. I'm down. Are you
I
kidding?
think that like right, like at that point then like you could make the card balanced if you like made the mana cost higher.
For sure.
Right. Like it was like 10 mana.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now it's coming down on turn 5. Your opponent may have things that are big enough to kill it on blocks. So it balances a little bit. Like it's just not like, okay, the game's over in 3 turns. Or I just don't have any creatures. So yeah, like I was trying to think of like big, flashy, splashy things that would be like reasonable. Because like I don't think that like the lower mana cost cards in Magic scale properly for Runeterra.
I agree.
Right, though, like a two mana 2/2 with like a mild ability doesn't really work.
Usually, it depends on the ability, because
it does.
Like, you know, for my deck, I have a couple of 2 mana cards that I think you would use it in Magic too. Like for example, in the deck that you helped me create, I have a 2 mana 2/3 with Predict, Chronomancer. So I play it on 2 mana, and then I do the Predict, which is look at the top 3 and then choose the card that I want to draw next. And I feel like that effect you see in Magic, no?
Yeah, where you would like a 2 mana, like usually a 2 mana creature that draws you a card or gives you some sort of selection is usually a 1/1 in Magic.
Oh, okay.
Like that's how they balance it.
Gotcha.
Is they're like, okay, we're gonna give you a card, but we're gonna make the creature small so that like it's not too overpowered. If you want like if you want a 2/2 that draws you a card, that's usually a 3 mana card.
Gotcha.
So it's just slightly different, but yeah, they kind of make it so like a 2 mana 2/3 is like kind of ahead of rate in Magic,
right?
And then the ability being good is gravy.
Like, would that be like a mythic or rare?
It would probably be a mythic.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Right. Yeah, like there was a rare that was a 2 mana 2/3 that like you could pay like 5 mana and give it like +3/3 or +4/4. So it was good early on, and then it had an ability late game that let you like push through damage.
Gotcha.
And that was a rare. Like it's in that rare mythic kind of range, and like it depends on I guess like how cool they think it is. Because they try to put cooler in air quotes cards at mythic.
So because I believe like Chronomancer is our version of like a common or an uncommon. So definitely,
Dear God.
Yeah. But I think it's all because of the resource system. It's because you're gonna get the ability to play those cards, so they can scale and have like crazier effects.
Yeah, well, like your like cheaper cards have to do more because you get to that mana cost sooner.
Right.
Right, like so. Because like you play your 3 and it has to be really impressive because then your opponent's going to play their 4.
Yes.
And so like our 3s are a little bit less impressive because half the time your opponent's just going to play their 3. Right? Like, you always know that your opponent's always going to be like 1 mana ahead of you after the next turn.
Right.
And we don't know that in Magic.
That's a really good point. And I also feel like 3 and 4 in Runeterra, at least in the decks that I play, after I see that like turn cycle, I'll already know if I'm winning or losing that game, if that makes sense. Granted, I play like aggressive style decks, but like my 3 and 4 is super important. Like if on my 4 I'm playing that 5/5 Overwhelm Yeti, I'm like 70 to 80% to win that game.
It's like your 3/4 area is kind of similar to like the Magic 2-drop. where if you're an aggressive deck, you want to play something on your first turn and then have something on your second, or worst case, have a really good 2.
Right.
So like put your opponent under pressure.
Right.
And like if you miss your 2-drop or you have to play your bad 2-drop, right, you feel like you're behind because now you can't like punch through their next creature. And like just because you're basically 1 or 2 mana ahead each turn.
Right.
In Runeterra, and it kind of just snowballs from there. Like your 3-4 spot is like, okay, do I have this like good early play to put them under pressure? And if you don't, then you feel like you're behind. That makes sense.
Yeah. So for me, like my 3-4 slots are super super important, which is why I always have like Renekton, who's like this 4 mana 4/4 challenger alligator god battle soldier that I just love. But yeah,
alligator god battle soldier. Like they just throw words together, don't they? There's just like 5 dice at like the riot headquarters, and they're like, "What is this thing?" We got alligator soldier god warrior. Okay, yeah, that's what he is.
It's all based off League of Legends lore, so it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of real funny, really good cards. In Runeterra that I don't know exactly would fly in MTG. But the last card that I would love to see in Runeterra, and it's because it's one of my favorite cards of literally all time in Magic, I would love to see like a Spell Queller effect. I think that you would have to cost it differently in Runeterra. But dear God, do I love that card.
So Spell Queller is 3 mana for a 2/3 evasive, and when it comes into play, you can counter a spell that costs 4 or less. So it's a way for you to like get board presence and to stop your opponent from doing something. Since you don't have counter spells in Runeterra, it might have to be like we call them like Fiend Hunter or like O-Ring effects, where it's going to exile a spell that's a creature that's already on the battlefield.
Gotcha.
And when that creature dies, when the Spell Queller dies, your opponent gets that spell back.
Right.
So, like, you would probably have to dial all the numbers up a little bit. Right? Like, it might have to be 5 or 6 mana to, like, kind of be played at the same spot in the game.
Right.
And then might have to eat things that cost 8 mana or less. Or 7 mana or less. Like, just a little bit bigger than it.
Yeah, I would probably say... I'd probably say 6 is probably the spot. Because there's a lot more going on in 6 than in 5.
Yeah. So, it's a card that kind of pulls double duty, which it seems like a lot of Runeterra cards need to do.
Yes.
It needs to, like, be a body that's relevant, plus it needs to deal with something or get you a card somehow back, at minimum.
Yes. So, yeah, those were just a couple of the thought experiments I wanted to run with good old Profe. Just wanted to give him a big thanks. It was kind of like an emergency situation. I wanted to make sure we brought out some sort of content out there. We have a small following, but we have a very loyal following. And I wanted to make sure we did right by y'all. I promise next week's episode is going to be a little more meta-focused and Runeterra-focused. I'm hoping that the patch drops soon. They haven't announced anything officially, but rumor is through the grapevine that they might be doing something later on this week or in the beginning of next week, just to kind of refresh what's happening right now, because I think the Runeterra scene is a little bit stale at the moment. But just wanted to give a big thank you to Profe for coming on and helping us out.
Thanks for having me. If you want to hear about Magic, you can find my podcast, Casual Try Hard MTG, anywhere you listen to a podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Casual Tripod. The Discord that you guys are already in for Legends of Runeterra, has a big Magic community in it as well. So if you want to come over there and talk some Magic or talk some Runeterra with Anthony,
Yes,
that
sir.
link is hopefully in the show notes.
It is.
With that, I think we have a show.
And over here on the Runeterra side, you can follow me on Twitter. It's Anthony Rico Play 1723 on Twitter, or El Charrua Rico. You can also find our stuff on our YouTube page, Casual Try Hard Legends of Runeterra. Actually, you can also find the very recent YouTube video that Profe and I did on their Magic YouTube video page, Casual Try Hard Magic the Gathering. It was a really funny episode. It was really fun. We played a combo deck that was a spicy meatball. We had lots of fun there. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it is at Casual Pod. And just make sure to interact with us, y'all. I can see certain different nations like to listen to us. People from Great Britain, Poland, Brazil. We got a little following over in Canada. So just make sure to come and interact with us. Make sure we can hear you, so we know we're not just talking to dead air or for our own egos. But for me, Anthony Rico Plays 1723. Catch you on the internets.
And I'm Brian, and I'll see you next time, Summoners. Alright, so bloopers, or I'm just gonna like mercilessly roast Anthony.
Oh, here we go.
So, here we go. So, as we all know, pandemic, people not really like having their stuff together, wearing a lot of sweatpants. So, I started wearing sweatpants around the house. And then things started falling out of my pockets.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I told my wife, I was like, this always used to happen to Anthony. He'd come over to my house, he'd be wearing sweatpants, and then we'd have to spend 25 minutes looking for his phone because it fell out of his pocket and went, like, under my car seat or like in a couch cushion. And he was always losing stuff out of the sweatpants pockets. And I was like, and I told him, this is why adults don't wear sweatpants.
This is all true.
So now, like, there's a pandemic and I have stuff falling out of my pocket and I'm like, I'm an adult. I'm just not supposed to wear sweatpants. I already established this like years ago.
But listen, how comfortable are those sweatpants, man?
They're pretty comfortable. I own like one pair, but they're pretty comfortable.
Do you own one pair?
I have one pair of sweatpants.
Oh, man.
And they are from, they are merch from a YouTube channel.
Wow.
Corridor Digital. I own 2 or 3 hoodies. 2 of them are from Corridor Digital. I have one that is the print of a motion capture suit. Yeah.
What?
Very fancy. So you know when they do mocap for like video games or like movies?
Yeah.
They have to put you in a suit so that the cameras can read your motion and feed it into the computer.
Right.
Those suits oftentimes have a pattern on them that makes it easier for the computer to read them. Mm-hmm. So they made a hoodie that has like a version of that pattern on it. So it looks like I'm wearing a mocapture suit.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah. Yeah. So all you summoners out there, you can wear sweatpants in your home, but not outside. Don't do it. I'm assuming you're adults. And if you're not adults yet, this is how you level up to adult. You look at yourself and you look at your door and you go, can't leave my door in these.
You heard it here, folks. When
there you go. That's how you know you're an adult.
When you're an adult and you're out there, don't do the sweatpants.